back to Cat's Eye on the Future. And greetings to everyone out there listening here on the Time Monk Radio Network, or if you're listening to the rebroadcast on the show on either the UK Pagan Network or the Heathen Radio Network, we want to welcome you too. And don't forget, the show is also available on YouTube archives. But back to tonight, we're going to return to our usual format with a weekly energy reading for current events, followed by a personal reading sent in by one of our listeners. I hope everyone enjoyed last week's full-hour interview with Freya Oswin, and we hope to have more special guests on in the near future, so be ready and stay tuned for that. But meanwhile, since we missed having any cards last week at all, let's take a look and see what the cards and runes have coming up for us this week. But before I actually read, as always, the legal disclaimer. These readings are for entertainment purposes only, but like any form of entertainment, they can be used for your own evaluation and information when making your very own personal decisions. Now, this week's version of the question is, what are the most likely energies and or events likely to be coming for the week August 12, 2013 to August 18, 2013? Now, if you would like to follow along with this week's cards, just go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com, that's Melody with an I, and look up the Cat's Eye Show pages for episode 13. For those of you not able to access the web right now, I'll do my best to describe the cards so you can also have an idea of what they're trying to say and what they look like. If you can view the cards, you will notice the first card. The one that really sets the tone for this reading is a rather gray and dark blue card with the figure of a person. They're crouched down in front of the cave. The cave is dark. There's an opening behind the person and lights coming in, but that figure is holding their head down, face down on the cave floor, and they can't see the light, and they even turn their back away from the cave entrance so absolutely no light can reach them. They're pretty much in a fetal position. You can't tell if the person's male or female, and it doesn't really matter because what you can tell is that this person is totally withdrawn, and the name of this card is, in fact, the Cave. The Cave card can be useful and have helpful aspects, especially when I'm reading for individual people, because, well, it's obviously a card of withdrawal. A withdrawal and self-examination can be very useful for people, provided it's just for a short period of time, and you do it with purpose and with forethought. However, most of the time, both for individuals and in this case for current events, this card usually signifies a depression, sadness, grief, fear-based withdrawal, or hiding from something, sometimes even literally hiding underground, like going into your basement, or going someplace you feel safe. And again, that can be kind of positive depending on the situation, but it's basically that retreat mode. This card can even mean depression in an economic sense and has come up that way in readings before. And I think in this reading, this may be one of the aspects the card is flagging. First, I think it likely that this week is a week that many people, tribes, nations, businesses, multinationals are going to feel like simply withdrawing into their own personal caves or their own space and hiding out there for reasons that may be partly or mostly economic. It's a little hard to tell yet, but it seems to be leaning that way. Now, why do I say that? Because the second card is Fortune. The Fortune card also has many positive aspects, in fact, probably more than the Cave does. It's about both physical and monetary fortunes, spiritual and mental fortunes, such as soul development or mundane education or skills development. This card shows a figure holding a lamp going up a dimly lit staircase with a treasure box at the top of the stairs. The stairs go around and around and around, so it's possible to feel like you're going backwards when actually you're still going forwards. And as long as you keep going forward, even when you feel like you're going backwards, you eventually get to the treasure. This is like one of those great symbolic Jungian cards in this deck. However, coming next to the Cave card, In this reading, I think the meaning of these cards really is largely physical fortunes, at least in terms of great fortunes, such as many wealthy people or businesses and things have in this world, particularly because this is a current events reading. You know, especially larger players like nations, mega banks, and multinational corporations may all be affected. And I think it will be a particularly rough week because the next card that comes up is destruction. Now, we've seen this card before, but it needs to be described again because it's not your basic tower deck tower destruction. It's sort of a similar energy, but it's not the same card. This card actually shows a terrible battle taking place, probably during the European Wars of Religion around the 16th or 17th centuries. There's a castle under siege, a burning church, battling soldiers in kind of Renaissance armor, and they're killing people and setting fires. There's what looks like a woman in the background about to be burned at the stake, or someone in a robe. And in the foreground, at the very front of the card, there's a priest lying, dying, or already dead, and he's holding a holy book with a cross on it. So presumably it's a Bible. This is one of the most complex cards in the deck. And while destruction can be creative destruction sometimes, like the sort that leads an individual or person to get rid of patterns, habits, things you don't want in your life. You're trying to quit smoking, that's a destruction of a habit. Or if you need to get rid of your garden weeds or your dust bunnies under the bed, couch cleaning can be destructive, but it's a positive destruction. But in this context, next to the fortune card and the cave card, I think the destruction is likely to be a lot more explosive and not likely to produce any directly positive results, at least not anytime soon. Again, in the long-term future, who can say? But in the short term, I think it's going to be pretty rough. Because what we have so far is depression combined with withdrawal, or a card that can mean economic depression sometimes, caused by the destructions of fortune. That's a pretty clear and unhappy reading. Now, not all the destruction of fortune may be economic, because remember, fortune carries with it that sense of luck, fate, or weird in the Norse Germanic worldview, that kind of otherliness of, but your luck especially is important. Having it is a good thing. Not having luck in the Germanic view or losing your luck can be a very unfortunate thing. So what we may have here are both the destruction or the start of destruction of physical fortune and a sense of spiritual security on the part of many this week. And possibly I'm sensing, particularly in the case of maybe some nations or ideas, their luck may be starting to run out. It's that kind of image of luck running down, or almost the dice rolling off and not showing up the way the gambler wishes them to. I also have a feeling that not everything in this reading may be limited to this week. This feels more like a progressive move in a rather nasty direction. Nasty especially if you're one of the big players in the world. I'm not sure individual people are going to be as affected as much. They're going to get, I think, some of the side effects, which, again, I think everybody's going to want to do a certain amount of hiding in their caves, but we're probably not going to be the immediate target of this. This feels much bigger. The final two cards seem to sum up what the results of this destruction of fortune and cave card combination are likely to bring about. We have the birth card, which is a rather simple card, a beautiful green plant rising up in a manner that's suggestive of the female reproductive tract or organs erupting and pushing up just before birth. And we have the castle tower card. This is not the Tower of Destruction. We've already had destruction in this reading. This is a different image. This is a strong, defensive fortress on a hill. Protective, but almost impossible to enter without an invitation. This castle doesn't even have a visible opening on the ground floor. The thing about castles is, during the Middle Ages, and particularly before the invention of serious gunpowder, very few castles were ever taken by warfare from the outside. People inside were either starved out and gave themselves up, or occasionally there would be treachery from within, where somebody inside the castle would open the gate for the invading army. But castles are incredibly protective, but they're also incredibly isolating, which I think is why it's important that on the picture we don't even see that drawbridge or that opening. Presumably it's behind it on the other side, but on the card all we see is those very strong defensive walls. Now, if I were reading this for a client, I would likely see this as either the birth of strong defenses in a positive sense, or perhaps as the birth or start of someone being defensive about something, perhaps even overly defensive, depending on what was in the rest of the reading. It could go either way. Given the previous three cards, on an international level, I'm going to suggest it is likely that this is the birth of something becoming more defensive. Perhaps in terms of money, currencies, banks, all things economic, but also possibly in a military sense as well. At the very least, I think we should be looking for news stories about famous people, corporations, countries, etc., becoming very defensive about their images, the information they provide, how they react to problems, etc. You might see defensive lawsuits, anything that involves defensive weaponry, all of that things, the things that become just more, and be a bit more prickly too. However, there's also energy out there for stories about military buildups or monetary lockdowns, you think suddenly stopping, like bank holidays or currency controls. And whatever other arcane maneuvers the world central bankers and governments think they could put into play to try to stop whatever is causing the destruction of their or other people's fortunes. And again, we get this image of, sort of putting the fingers in the dike. I don't know the exact mechanisms that will be used, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but this is what it sort of feels like. This may be very difficult to do, though, because the rune staves Oruj or the Arak. This is the giant cattle of ancient Europe that are totally undomesticated and huge, wild, and unpredictable. And while on the one hand, this rune is also a symbol of that great mother cow Adumla, who's also an Arak, who licks the ice with her tongue and melts it to begin the modern age. She's really kind of a wonderful mother cow figure. The Araks as a whole are wild, humongous, stampeding animals led by a bull that can take an enormous herd off into a dead run, and it's only going to stop when the animals get tired and want to stop, or they themselves go off a cliff. So basically you have this image of rampaging, stampeding, ghost riders in the sky, for those of us of the right age remember that song, thundering across and ahead, and a little kid's putting up a sign saying stop. It's probably not going to happen, and you might divert them, and at worst you might divert things over into a cliff, or you might get run over. But really, until those bulls and cattle that follow them are ready to stop, they're probably not going to. Now, I'm not sure which outcome is more likely from this particular round of fortune and destruction, whether they're likely to go off a cliff or whether they're likely just to stop at some point and everybody can catch their breath and possibly, graze for a while before deciding which way to go next. But I'm pretty sure that for most of us, a nice, safe cave is where a lot of people are going to want to wait while all this is going on in the outside world. And that's not a bad thing. That is the sense in which the cave is very good if you deliberately take it that way. Now, I decided at this point in the reading to pull a second rune to see if I could get any further clarification in the direction things were likely to take. And if anything, it looks like they're going to keep running on full speed ahead once they get started. We already had the stampeding energy, and now we have the Rido rune. The Rido looks like an R in the Roman alphabet, which is probably where it came from. And it's usually translated as riding or travel, and some forms of communication, especially communication that rides like the wind, or things like radio, or that kind of instant types of communication, messengers. Not only does this fit with the image of stampeding cattle, though, going full steam ahead, the Rido rune also hints that whatever the overall situation is, it's possibly going to affect actual travel and communications in some way. It doesn't have to, but it may very well. This rune also came up for this current weekend's reading. I'm actually doing this report on Saturday, the 10th of August. So this Rido energy will already have started and be moving and gaining speed by the time Monday comes around and this reading actually goes into place, the Rido rune should be running full speed ahead. Going out on a limb and making some guesses, I will not be surprised if this week something in the economic world overheats or runs away in some fashion. This could be running in either direction. It could be either getting faster or slower or going down or going up. But the ultimate result of whatever it is going to threaten people. It's going to especially threaten wealthy individuals, corporations, or nations, or someone who's going to take notice of it and again try to stop it. They're going to try to stop that stampeding herd. If it's not economic, it's something that's going to affect economics. So it could be something else spinning out of control, but it's all somehow intertwined with fortunes and money in some way. What is pretty clear is that once this starts, again, it may be very difficult to stop. And I repeat, the best way to handle this on a personal level is likely to be a combination of hiding out in a safe place, and once you have time to watch the situation a bit, building up your own defenses. That includes emotional and spiritual ones, as well as physical ones, in the best way you can. Now, the individual is probably not going to have much effect on those overarching defensive castle strategies that play out in the macro world. But they can take steps to turn their emergency cave, their personal space, into a well-defended, comfortable, and well-stocked castle on the hill. So you start out with just this image of kind of withdrawing into this barren, but very safe place. And then you start to build it up and make it your own and personalize it. And I think we can do this as much internally as externally. I mean, yes, you can make your home more comfortable. You can make sure you have food and water and possibly a generator, things like that. But also, and we'll talk some other time more about the concept of your own inner cabin or castle or special place where you go into meditation and you go, and I have a cabin in the woods. People have different places that they go. But that's sort of a mental construct that you can create. It's sort of your personal inner safe space. It's a visualization, an imagination, if you will, of your perfect, safe, comfy space. And I think that it's going to be important to kind of do a combination of both inward and outward work this week. It won't hurt to do it, because if all this energy just plays out in the real world and leaves most of us as spectators, we'll have a nice, safe place when we go to bed at night. We can think about, we can sort of ease into our stuffed chair or our rocking chair by our imaginary fire in our cabin and just go to sleep. But if it does reach down to affect those close to us or ourselves, we'll be a lot better prepared to keep our own fortunes as intact and safe as possible as we can. Again, both the external fortunes or our own luck, which we're helping to create in this case, and that of our own inner being. We keep it healthy, we keep it strong in this way, no matter what's going on around us to a degree. To sort of sum up, our material fortunes always have their ups and downs, but spiritual and mental fortunes can be taken with you wherever you are. So this is probably also a good time to hunker down in your castle cave with some good books, meditations, and other learning tools to keep yourself busy during this coming time period. This is probably going to be a week when the outside world is likely to break out in a dead run or stampede over a cliff. Probably about something economic or something equally as difficult for the average person to do anything about. But the castle card suggests there could be hints of battles and defensiveness in some places, and again, that could actually be military, or it could just be a reaction to the things that are happening. But this is also a week when individuals can find safety by withdrawing both physically and emotionally from that overall chaos as much as possible, and then concentrate on their own spiritual and physical defenses. This is a week when travel is likely to be affected in various ways, both positive and negatively. So as individuals, if you can stay close to home, do so. But if you can't, be sure to have a good book and some cash with you in case you're delayed or you have to stay over somewhere. Again, this also came up in my weekend reading, so this is a repeat of information, which is why I'm stressing it, because, I'm not saying don't travel. Sometimes you have to, but just be ready and be prepared mentally that you may get stuck for a bit and be ready to wait it out. That makes, again, That's a part of showing up your own inner defenses, is being forewarned. You can sort of be aware, and you'll be a step ahead of those other people sitting on the freeway honking their horns and getting really, really mad. This is overall a very high energy and active week. I've talked in the past about kind of active energy and passive energy. Both are important. Neither is good nor bad. But this has been a period that in the cards for the last week on a daily read have been very much activated by the sun. And solar energy is very, very active and powerful, and it makes people tend to feel awake and they want to move and they want to do things. And this energy is like, not necessarily solar, but this active energy is likely to even increase the feeling of many people to withdrawal, which is really a passive response, which would be normal. I think that's why we've got the cave card, which is the one really inactive card in this deck, because you've got all this power, bright, light, shine, and move, and people go, wait a minute, I don't want to move anymore. I want to just like go away and have a cup of tea now. And that may be the very best response in a lot of cases, as long, again, as you do it intentionally and with purpose, rather than simply running in fear or actually letting yourself become so depressed. Oh, I'm so depressed. I am the robot, and I am just so depressed. You want to try to avoid that. And humor is another good way to do that. A note here before we close this reading out completely, though. In late June, I did a reading for the following 6 months, and I loosely assigned a card to each month through December 2013. This is the month of August, and the August card is Union. The Union card is all about relationships, unions, organizations, alliances, treaties, etc. On its own, it's usually a very good card, and it's essentially the Lover's card in this deck. You have the two beautiful streams coming together with a loving cup, things in perfect harmony. However, a union or relationship is only as good or as solid as its members are. I suspect that some of what is coming in the next couple of weeks may have a profound effect on various sorts of unions, especially those involving money, currencies, great fortunes, family alliances, etc. You get this kind of feeling of just pressure on them. And I'm not saying that anything's going to break up or anything's going to be combined, but there may be a lot of pressure either towards unification or away from unification. It is sort of going to be a central theme of this month, throughout the entire month, if my first card reading was correct. So look for union. Also, you could sort of look this month for stories about, on a much more mundane level, famous divorces, famous marriages, that sort of thing, unions of corporations. And in your personal life, you may also some things may suddenly come together, and other things that have been together may sort of start drifting apart. So you have this kind of union, disunion imagery for the entire month. So just keep that in mind as the rest of the month goes by. Well, that looks to be a really interesting week, or couple of weeks that are coming up here. Thankfully, this mostly feels for me like serious macro world stuff. It's just really time to get the popcorn popper out and get ready to watch the news. I know that's what I'm going to be doing, because I don't think we can have a lot of effect on it, really, except be ready to move or defend ourselves if we have to, again, in spiritual as well as physical sense. But otherwise, it's popcorn time, and just, sit back and watch, because it's going to be a show. Meanwhile, I'm not sure if next week's actual show on the radio will be another carded rune review or another special interview. I'm working on that. I'm lining some interesting people up, and I just have to hear back from them for scheduling and things. But whenever our next reading show happens, either next week or probably the week after, I'll try to take a look and see back at this one if I can spot exactly what some of these cards were flagging or not. Because, I want to see if we have like something really obvious, or if we still have a building pattern going on, because sometimes that happens too. Not everything happens the week it originally shows up, if I've noticed. You start sometimes to see the seeds of things that blow up later. Although I have to say this is a pretty powerful reading, so I will be surprised if we don't see some things. But like what happened in Egypt a few weeks ago, it may take a while for the entire episode to play out. But for now, it's time for you to go get a cup of tea and get ready to sit down in our comfy virtual reading room for a very special personal reading for one of our listeners. We will return with that reading right after these short messages. All the music used on the show today is from musicalley.com, your source for free-to-air music for podcasts. The artists place their music up for free to air in hopes that you, the listener, will visit their site and purchase some of their outstanding musical offerings. So after the show, why not visit musicalley.com and explore their extensive playlist?
She sings, she goes home in the evening with the dew all on her wings.
Do you have questions? The cards have answers. If you would like a personal reading with Melody, just go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. That's Melody with an I, psychicreadings.com, for information, or email me at melodyreader@gmail.com. Readings are available using Skype, phone, email, or even in person if you are lucky to live in Ireland. Why not find out what special messages the cards have just for you and book a private reading today?
And see me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland. See me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland.
Welcome back, everyone, to part 2 of Cat's Eye on the Future. Tonight we have another example of a typical question that professional readers get. This time it's asking for clarification of either a dream, a vision, or another message that seems to be from a guide or from the other world. In this particular case, we're dealing with a waking case of what psychics would call clairaudience or psychic hearing, rather than the more usual dream. But the setup for looking at it is pretty much the same. We have the words of the message the person got, but as a human being may not be able to quite understand exactly what it translates into, especially when it comes to moving forward or using in their own personal lives. This question is from a lady I'll call Curious, and it concerns her husband's recent experience. She writes, "My husband, who is very intuitive, has recently heard, quote unquote, 2 or 3 times the same sentence from his guides. As usual, they spoke, again in quotes, very simply, 'You will not be here very long.' The context was his gazing out the window and admiring our new lawn. We bought a home, moved in early May, and are still slowly unpacking. But I would like some clarification as to the meaning of the word here. Is it about our physical location or something else? Thank you, Curious." Again, for those listening at home, you can find the cards and runes for this reading at my webpage for episode 13. But for those without a computer, I concede that the first card, the one that frames the reading, shows the situation is fluid and is not totally decided yet. That's because the first card is the scales. This is a picture of a giant set of scales on a branch of an old apple tree. The apples fall, and the weight of the scales is eventually tips, and eventually you know it's going to tip over one way or the other. But a lot of apples are also falling on the ground, so we just can't possibly know to predict for certain which way the scales is going to go yet. In a personal reading like this, the scales also often indicate a decision that simply isn't possible for the inquirer to control. In this case, the second card makes this fact even stronger, because the second card is the message. This is a card with a picture of a message in a bottle. So it's that old-fashioned message washed up from the sea. This message card tends to make stronger the cards beside it in sort of a "this is the message." So we have the first card of the scales, and the first card, remember, usually sets the tone of the reading, followed by the message card. So you have sort of a double whammy power card focusing on the scales, and that just makes it indecision, not decided yet, judgment, something going on here. The card on the other side of the messenger, interestingly enough, is the moon. Now, the moon is about all things deep and hidden, stuff we can see and stuff we can't see, the stuff of dreams. In fact, it's really the card of the other world itself, or spirit, which is where this message came from. The picture on the card is the crab rising out of the ocean and reaching towards the moon. And that image of reaching out for dreams really describes what this reading is all about, where after all we're trying to find the essence of the message that was given. But it also suggests there are hidden things going on in the life of Curious and her husband, or going around them, not necessarily things they are doing, but things that are happening that they may affect their situation that they may not be aware of because it's still been hidden. And the card that comes after is the card with the raven on it, or the never card, and it suggests that they're probably not moving house, at least not right away, because the never card, it doesn't mean something will never happen, but it means that if it does happen, it will take so long, it'll seem like never going to happen. So more than likely, I don't think a move is imminent, like right away, like tomorrow. But the raven card's also kind of the dark messenger, as in quotes the raven nevermore. So we got to be careful with that one. And it's followed by the body card. And the body card is the card that a lot of my readers call the creepy card. It's the one that looks like the Renaissance illustration of an anatomy lesson. My husband, the med student, doesn't think it's creepy at all, but most people find a partly dissected human body to be kind of creepy, and that's what this card is. And it usually represents either health or the material world. Now, whenever this card comes up in a reading, I usually suggest to the person that if they have any health issues, they may want to visit with their doctor. And I'm going to particularly emphasize this one here because of that raven card next to it. I'm not allowed to give health readings, and I'm not going to do so here. I'm simply going to say that this is one definition of that card, and it's a good thing to get checked. However, it hopefully means that the combination of never and the body card is using the body card in its other usual meaning, which is the material world, and I can't think of anything more material than a home. So again, hopefully it's simply meaning that you will never, or seem like you never have to move the body. We can hope that that is the way that it's being read. Now, the two runes that come after are mixed as well, and they also suggest that if a move is made, not that it will be made, but if it is made or is discussed, there may be some issues with money that might be the cause, or finances of some sort. Because the first rune is Fehu, which is money or wealth, and that's usually a very good card. It can also be about sex and conflicts over money, but I don't pick that up about this reading. Fehu, in its most basic sense, is translated cattle, and unlike the cattle of our first reading, which was the aurochs, the wild cattle that, the cattle that stampede and run full speed ahead, Fehu is like the family cow. It's the one that gives you the milk and provides the cheese and keeps you warm in winter. So it's that kind of good, secure, home-building wealth. The second rune is Nalthij, which is the rune of the two sticks rubbed together to make fire. It's the most basic form of making fire, and it's called need fire, or need, or desperation, or difficulty. You wouldn't use two sticks to rub together to make a fire unless you absolutely had to. And that's because even by the time of the runes, people had like flints and steel, which are like precursors of matches. They could normally light fires much more easily than you could with two sticks. If you've ever watched somebody try to light a fire with two sticks, unless they know exactly what they're doing, it can be an extremely daunting process, especially if you really need that fire. So that's really the feel of that room, is that desperation to get something. So it could be that if a move is contemplated, it'll probably be from a combination of factors, such as possible health or material world issues, again, largely hidden at this point, most likely, combined with a money issue that may result from something that happens beyond their control, something they're not expecting, or something that is just out there that hasn't happened yet, because we're back to the scales card again. And it may not happen. Again, this is all very fuzzy. With all readings dominated by the scales card, you're really starting out with a position of uncertainty anyway. And it's really usually not clear until those scales drop one way or another, and the overall issue that impacts a possible event start clearing out that sort of future pathway, and you can again get a much clearer reading. And for that reason, I'll be happy to relook at this question again in a few months, when I suspect things will have sorted themselves out a bit more clearly. In other words, it's more likely that those scales will have dropped in one side or the other. Meanwhile, Curious and her husband should continue to pay attention to the message from their hidden otherworld guides, probably be careful of their personal health and well-being, and meanwhile, enjoy their home for now, but be ready just in case the situation changes. Even perhaps having a few plans in place in case they're needed, because they can always be dropped or filed away later if the scales fall in the other direction, and this turns out to be a warning that was listened to, but didn't necessarily play out in the way that we in the physical world might be expecting it to play out. It may mean something else. So, again, that is a really unclear answer. I'm sorry, sometimes readings are this way, but hopefully that gives you some information, Curious, and like I said, I will be delighted to look at it again later. It was a really interesting reading. It's almost as if the second two cards were saying, this message is from the other world, or this message is from your dreams. And to me, that clearly says that this was likely a true visitation from a spirit guide. Even if we're still not totally certain exactly what the reading means, or the message meant, we do have some clues for now. And I suggest that Curious and her husband continue to be open and work on things and be open to hearing more from the spirit world, because I think they will. Not all readings are quite as direct in telling you, yes, spirit said that. But most of the time, the cards in such a reading will give some indication whether a dream or a visionary experience is important, or if it's just your mind working on its usually nightly problem solving, which is very important work too, but doesn't always signal an advisory for the future or some great portent. Sometimes eating an ice cream cone on a city bus just means that afternoon you had an ice cream cone and later you rode a city bus. Your brain needs to process that stuff during the day, and it will. Other times, our dreams give us messages that are important but are symbolic. You know, the ice cream cone suddenly becomes something totally different. It's your frozen, stuck situation that may be about to melt all over your hand if you don't do something. That's another way. And then finally, sometimes we get these much more direct messages, either because we dream something that we see that may happen and it actually does, or we have an ancestor or somebody actually come to us and say something like this to us, or even rarer, people like Curious's husband, if you are gifted in that way, may actually hear with your inner or even your outer ear that sort of message, or see a being or a guide come to you and tell you something. And the cards are a great way to look at it and try to decide whether or not something is actually a specific message that you need to do something about, or it's your own mind just sorting things out the way we're created to do and shuffle things through the day. But I think for now, that pretty much concludes this reading and the show for this evening. I hope you enjoyed this personal reading, and if you would like to be considered for a reading on this show, just send your question to melodyreader@gmail.com. That's Melody with an I, reader one word @gmail.com, and put show reading in the subject line, and I'll consider your question for use on the air. But till now, I think it's about time to say good night from Ireland. Take care, and see you next time.
But here's a health to the company, and one to my lass.
You have been listening to Cat's Eye on the Future, the show where we take a glimpse of the energies coming soon into your world and into your future. Be sure to join us again next time when we explore another chapter of Cat's Eye on the Future.
Here again, but here's a health to the company, and one to my lass. Let's drink and be merry, all out of one glass. Let's drink and